Is my life predetermined? And if I awaken, do I gain free will? Well, to answer this question, we need to peel back many layers of who we think we are and come to something more essential. And only then do we approach something like free will, which is actually going to look a lot different than how we're used to thinking of it. So in the early 20th century, there was this amazing spiritual teacher named Gurdjieff, who was this kind of crazy man who would just mess with people and shock them into awakening. And one of his big points in doing this was to show us that, while we may think that we're so independent and free and that we have choice in all these matters, that in reality, we're like automatic machines just running these habits, and everything in our lives just happens. And, it's a pretty harsh way of looking at things. It's a pretty hardcore approach that he took, not very loving. And I think that's something that's missing from his whole approach to things. But there is a lot of wisdom in it. And if we use some of these ideas correctly, they can really help us to awaken and really help us to move more in the direction of the free will that we really want. So a great story that his disciple P.D. Uspensky tells about him in his book In Search of the Miraculous is about how Gurdjieff would, in his travels around Russia, he would take rugs along with him, and he would sell these rugs to try to make some extra money. And one day, he had set up his stall, and this woman came by and she wanted 3 rugs, and she was driving a really hard bargain. And she just kept trying to bargain him down and down and down, until eventually he goes, I'll tell you what, you can have all of these rugs for half the price you just offered me for those 3. And the lady takes a beat, and then she looks at him and she starts to bargain him down on that. Of course, he knew that was going to happen, right? And he packs up his rugs and says, I'll let you know tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. And he leaves town and never comes back. So, that's an extreme example, but in some way, we all do this kind of crap, right? I'm sure you've got your own version of it. Some kind of just unreasonable compulsion that draws you, and when you look at it, it's like, why would you ever do that, right? And in so many ways, we do this again and again and again and again. So for Gurdjieff, basically before we can even begin to move toward having any choice in anything, we have to see all of the ways in which we do this sort of stuff. And, that can be pretty hard because it pushes our identification buttons and our judgment buttons in a really big way. It's hard to do that sort of thing without becoming disgusted with yourself, without just wanting really hard to say, no, that's not me. All this sort of stuff comes up. Of course, this is one of the biggest habits of all, right? Our identification with things. We just do it. This is how the ego works. And we use judgment to reinforce it. Another habit. So if we look further into this idea of habits, right, we can see that all of nature in some way is built on habits. If we take just the eye, right, these eyes in my head, your eyes in your head, are in some way related to the very first cell that was ever sensitive to light on planet Earth. Over billions of years, eyes have developed. And there's a lineage, right? And within this sort of field of eyeballness, all eyes exist. This is an idea in biology put forward by Rupert Sheldrake. It's called morphic resonance, the idea that once something starts to happen, that this kind of creative intelligence in the universe brings forth some form. Over time, that form becomes like the world will produce more and more and more and more of it because it takes on strength. It builds over time, okay? As habits do, right? We know this in our own life as like neuroplasticity, right? These things happen on different levels. So this has happened in every level of the body, right? In biology, like all cells, right, are structured in a similar way. All cells contain DNA, right? And we can go on and on and on about that. But it holds true in our minds, our psychology, our cultures, everything. Just all of these things. If we can look at them and see them as these habits that form and build and have their own kind of existence, and stop thinking of them as something that we are in control of or we created, then we can start to relate to them in a different way. So one of the ways to do this, to start making progress in this direction, is to just be able to observe yourself. So I've talked about this in different ways before on this channel, but a really great way that we can build this muscle and also strengthen the muscle of acting contrary to our compulsions is to do this. So try this with me right now. Just stare at a point right in front of you. Let's have a staring contest. Okay? You stare at a point right in front of you, and every time you get the urge to look away, don't. So if somebody drops, a bunch of plates next to you, don't look. If a bear comes riding in on a unicycle, don't look. If, a ghost shows up, don't look. If UFOs, land in front of you, don't look. Just stay looking at that point. Now you notice that even as you stare at this point, you can do different things with your attention. For example, you can stare really intensely in a narrow sort of way at the point. Or you can continue to stare at the point, but take in more of the periphery, take in more of the background. Just become more aware of what's there, but don't move your eyes. Now you can continue to stare, but put your attention more on the sounds in your environment. Like the bird that's chirping outside my window right now. Now, when we do that, we can also start to observe all of those habits that we are. And we just brush aside the judgments, brush aside the identification, start from the basis that anything that you think is important in this matter is not important. It's just not. Period. Just let that be like your starting point. Anything that you can think, not important. Just try it. Okay? Just try it. So you focus your attention strongly, and then you allow yourself to observe. Not interpret, but observe. And so, you can see yourself from these different perspectives. Just kind of roll through them. Observe your body. Observe how your body is responding to that food you ate earlier. Observe how your body is responding to the posture that you've been sitting in. Observe how your mind is right now. Does it have a lot of thoughts? Does it have a little? Observe your emotional state. How does that connect to your body? How does that connect to your thoughts? This is not analysis. This is just watching. It's like you just take a snapshot. Boom. What's going on here? Now, if you're into astrology, as I am, I use astrology a little bit differently than a lot of people use it. Most of us use astrology to get explanations for who we are, how we are, why we are. This is my personality, what's going to happen to me. I find it more interesting to use it as a key to help me observe these kinds of patterns. Simple as that. And it also helps me tune in to that bigger cosmic wholeness. Now, this is another part, and this is part of Gurdjieff's system too, as it is many kind of great esoteric systems. But I also come at it with the angle of love, right? And this is not just about astrology. This is an element kind of missing from the Gurdjieff perspective that I want to bring into it now, which is crucial. I think that we can get that strong kind of willpower, self-control, observer thing. But then we can also look at all of that stuff with love. We can look at the automatic nature of the universe and all of these things that have built themselves up and spontaneously self-organized and created, and see the intelligence behind it and see the reflection of the pattern out there with the pattern within, and tune to the flow of that and tune to the beauty of that, and just approach it with a sense of appreciation for what it is, instead of a sense of disgust and like, oh, this is weighing upon me, right? It's just, wow, I want to get to know you. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know you, right? Just look at it all with love and curiosity. That is going to really help as well, because what that does, it starts to move you into your heart. And heart awareness, right? I mean, when we think about the heart, if we're thinking about it from a biological and spiritual standpoint, the heart is not just an organ that pumps blood. It's this amazing electromagnetic transmitter that's got 5,000 times the electromagnetism of the brain, and its field reaches up 10 feet above our heads, right? It expands out around us. Literally, this is measurable, like, phenomenon. This is not just something that spiritual people say. It's like scientists say this too, right? So a lot of people that would roll their eyes at a lot of the stuff that I talk about, it's like, no, this happens. And when we kind of tune into that, we're tuning into this field that has this ability to control the way everything else in our system operates. You know, everything basically can come into entrainment with the vibrations of our heart, and the vibrations of our heart can come into an entrainment with the vibrations of the planet and the cosmos. And there's like a lot I can talk about there, but basically in doing this, you'll see that it changes the quality of how you relate to things, right? When you're only living in here, you're always going to feel separate from, okay? And when you are feeling separate from, you are not separate from. You're just thinking you're separate from, and it's going to cause you to dig ever deeper into the compulsions, right? And so the irony is like, I'm separate, I'm an individual. No, you're not. I'm not. You start to build in that strong willpower observer thing. You tune to the heart. Then you can appreciate and connect to the flow of things more. And now this is where that next piece comes in, and where real free will, as it truly exists, comes in. And that's the will to surrender, right? It's like the will to control ourselves, to have self-control, to have mental mastery, and the will to say, oh, there's a higher will here. And it's not just like, it's not like a weakness, this kind of surrender. It's surrendering to a higher intelligence, which is within you. It's just not who you think you are. Okay? I've heard it put one way like this, that who you think you are, right? The you know, the Alex right here, is a finger on a hand, on an arm, on a body controlled by another brain, right? That's the will that we want to tap into. And that's the will, you know, in Tantric terms, in Shakti terms, that's the will of the mother, right? The universal mother, the energy and the power behind everything. And, you know, when we get all these pieces in place and we attune to that higher will, what Tantrics call Icha, right? Divine will, it's a cooperative kind of a thing, right? We move forward with our plans, and then, you know, things either go our way or they don't. But if we're tuned into that dimension, say through mantra, if we shreem in the heart, then we find that this will starts to work itself out in interesting, mysterious, playful, amazing sorts of ways in our lives. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any interest in counseling with me, just check out my website, www.21stcenturyalchemy.com. Those words are all spelled out. And I look forward to hearing from you. Talk to you next time. Thanks.